Hello, happy Black History Month, happy World Read Aloud Day. This is author Tonya Duncan Ellis with another episode of Write This, My Author interview show. And it's an especially great day today because I'm welcoming on Bryan Patrick Avery, an author who is going to come on and talk about his newly released book, Black Men in Science. And this book is just wonderful. I finished it this weekend and there were so many gems, so much inspiration, and I can't wait to have him on and talk about the research he did to prepare the book and all the behind the scenes information. So it's going to be wonderful to have him on. And if, of course, this book is timely, I'm sure the release was planned because it's coming out here in the beginning of Black History Month. And this is one of my favorite months of the year where I love to learn about my history, which I do all year long. But I love seeing all the information that comes out about Black history, about my history and culture. So it's really exciting. And I see that Bryan has joined, so I'm going to send him his invitation. Get him on. Okay. And get him right on here. And thank you, everybody who has joined in. I'm glad to see familiar faces joining in. Hey, Bryan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to have you on to talk about your beautiful new book.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations on
Yeah,
the
thank you for
release.
having me. Woo-hoo.
Yes, I love this book. It is so
Oh, thank
good.
you. Thank you so much.
And I had finished reading the 1619 Project, and then
Mhm.
I read your book. And then I said, oh, I got to read a romance now because reading some of the information kind of gets me going. And my kids are
Yeah,
like, here she goes again, because I started saying, you got to know your history. You got to know this. But this is
right.
just a wonderful book. And I'm just so happy that you wrote it and proud of you for what you've done. This is going to be a great resource for children, parents, and all of us. So thank you for this work.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed writing this. I almost didn't write it, actually. I almost didn't take this project on. But I'm
Oh,
really,
okay.
really glad that I did. And yeah, we can talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But yeah, I almost passed on this project. But I'm glad I did. You talked about needing to go read a romance. I'm reading a stack of kids' mysteries now because I too needed a break. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it
It was emotional writing it, and then I had some time off while it was going through editing and things like that, and then picking it up again and getting ready for the release. It was emotional again. And so it's one of those things where I'm glad I wrote it. I think it's important, but I realize some of it can be difficult to think about the struggles these men went through. And then as a scientist myself, I studied physiology. I interned at the UC Davis Center for Neuroscience. I've worked in technology my whole career. A lot of what is in this book that these men struggled with are things that Black scientists and doctors still struggle with today. And
oh,
so it can be difficult to read, but I think it's important to read, and I think it's important for people to realize it's easy to say that something that happened to James McCune Smith in the early 1800s is ancient history, except those things still happen today.
right. And reading it fills me with pride too, to see how much my race has overcome and all
Mhm.
the accomplishments people made despite all the obstacles in their way.
Yeah, and I think that for me is probably one of the biggest goals of the book. Is I think the stories of these men are important, but I think they're so inspiring. And I think for anybody, regardless of your race or regardless of what the struggles are, to see the struggles they had to overcome in order to become successful and to make the contributions they did, it shows you can do it.
Yeah.
In many cases, you'll see in the book where it took more than just them, right? They needed help. And so knowing to ask for help, and then not only that, but also knowing when to help others. And I think that's an important part, and it's one of the themes throughout all of the biographies that you'll see is at some point they all found a way to help and mentor others, which I think is a key part of success. Nobody does it alone. Even in the writing world, right? Nobody does it alone. It takes a
Definitely
village.
not.
And so I think that those were some of the important things that I tried to point out in all the biographies, that all these men took time to help to mentor others.
Yeah. Now, Bryan, you touched on earlier when we started speaking, you said you were hesitant to take on this project initially. What made that happen, or how did that come about?
Well, so this is something that came up. I got a call from an editor and they said, hey, we think this would be a really good idea. We think it could help fill a void that needs filling. Is this something you'd be interested in doing? And I've been under contract for some project or another since late 2019. And this was going to come up during a break. I had about 3 months where I could do nothing, or I could do whatever I wanted and all of that. And my first thought was, I don't know if I really want to take on another project. But the more we talked about it, and the more I started to see how I felt like it could help, and I felt like I could tell the stories from the vantage point of somebody who has lived through some of these struggles and who has, to be quite honest, relied on some of the work that these men have done. It became more and more exciting to me. And so then it was sort of like, how can I not do it? So I was excited to get started once I finally made the decision to do it. And like I said, emotionally it was tough, but I thought it was important. And I figured if they could live through it, surely I could write about it.
Right. And I feel like you did a great job writing this in a child-friendly way,
Well, thank
making
you.
this accessible to the youth as well.
Yeah, and I think that was a challenge for me a little bit, because I wanted to make sure it was accessible, but I also wanted to be clear about some of the struggles, some of the issues, and also some of the triumphs. And it's hard writing a book about science for kids, because you have to make sure they can understand the science and that doesn't get distracting and all of that. But at the same time, you want to make sure that they have an opportunity to kind of learn and get ideas and thoughts that can help maybe shape their interest in science. And so it was a delicate kind of balance, but it was a lot of fun to write. And I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to talk to people about the book and about the individuals that are featured in the book.
Right. And it's kind of a perfect marriage, since you are a scientist, for you to
Yeah,
write
and
this particular
yeah.
book.
Yeah, it was fun. Sometimes it made it hard because I had to remind myself that not everybody reading this is into science.
Mhm.
Um, but it was a lot of fun, and like I said, it gave me an opportunity to sort of pay tribute to some of the scientists who've come before me and who were inspirational for me.
And I like how you had different areas of science touched on as well.
Hmm.
Thought that was, because I'm not a scientist, and it held my attention. I was interested, and it made
Oh,
me
that's
want to
good to
learn
know.
about different areas of science.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to show that, African Americans have contributed to all kinds of different fields, whether it's medicine or, inventions or, any of those kinds of things. And then as we get into the later years, into computer science and different things like that. I wanted to make sure I called those kinds of things out. One of the biographies I had the most fun writing about was David Harrell Blackwell, who was really, I mean, he was a mathematician, but he was really focused on statistical analysis and game theory, which is, to me, is always a really fascinating thing. And you don't hear a lot about African Americans involved in that field. And so I wanted to make sure I highlighted him because I wanted to expose readers to a field of study we don't talk about a lot. It's a really fascinating field, and it's used in nearly everything from the insurance business to military, politics, all of those different things. Game theory is used in all of those. And a lot of times we use game theory without even really thinking about it. Anytime we try to figure out, hey, what's their angle here? What do they want to get out of this interaction? That's the basis of game theory. And we don't think about it that way. So it was fun to be able to include him in the book in a way that I think might spark curiosity for a reader somewhere who might then go and read a little bit more about
And I can't remember which one it was. It may have been him, but I really also loved how you had one person, the parent wanted them to either be a doctor, teacher, there were like boxes they wanted them to fill because they
it.
knew
Yeah,
that was success. But it's saying there's other avenues for success.
yeah. So I think that was James West's biography, but that was actually a very, very common thing. I mean, it wasn't unique to his family. And he had to kind of go against his father's wishes to pursue a career in the sciences and invention. And we're all lucky he did, because he went on to invent the electric microphone, which is what you and I are using to talk to one another today. It's used in hearing aids, Tickle Me Elmo. I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous. It's the most produced microphone anywhere in the world. And our lives would not be the same without it. And so, and that was an area where, you know, he's an interesting guy. If you remember at the beginning, I talk about how he electrocuted himself, and playing around with different things. And I wanted to tell that story because I think that's one of the areas where that could have been the end for him, right? It could have been, whoa, this is too dangerous. You stay away from that stuff. And instead, he got a job working with his cousin as an electrician. And it really developed his skills and his interests. And those are the kinds of things when we look at, you know, how can we help young people develop is, you know, we all fail in some way, shape, or form, right? And it's how you respond to that failure. And James West's story really, I think, hones in on the value of picking yourself up and keep going forward. Don't let setbacks dissuade you from trying to reach your goals.
Right, and that resilience is just seen throughout the book with each of the scientists you highlight. Now, you say, since you're a scientist, how did you become a writer? How did you get into writing?
So I always loved to read. I was raised in a family where reading was important. We had books everywhere. There are too many. I won't turn the camera, but in addition to the bookcases, there are also books all over the floor out here. And so we always read, and I loved reading. And around 5 or 6, I started to kind of write little stories, and I always really enjoyed that. And I spent a lot of time writing almost exclusively poetry. And it was something I always enjoyed. And then my daughter was born in 2005, and she had some health issues and all that. So I spent a lot of time at home with her making up stories. And people kept saying, hey, you know, you ought to think about writing some of these down. And the truth is, I've never written down any of the stories I've told her, but it did really get me more interested and back into writing and excited about it. And so it's sort of the left brain, right brain thing. I think it kind of balances off the science part as I get to do a little bit of creativity as well.
Now, what are some of your other books? I see one behind you I recognize.
Yeah, so this is the Freedmen Field photograph. This is talk about emotional. This is a very personal story. My grandfather was involved in the 1945 Freedmen Field Mutiny, where a group of Tuskegee airmen protested against Jim Crow regulations in the military. The men were arrested, and they were going to be flown off of the base, and no one would say where, but they were going to be flown off in court-martial. And the military police went around to the group that was watching this and took away all of the cameras. My grandfather, who was a photographer, he was the first Black aerial photographer in the armed forces, figured they would do something like this, so he built a camera out of a shoebox. And he stood out on the flight line with the shoebox under his arm and took pictures of this event. And the pictures were published in the Pittsburgh Courier, and that led to about 500,000 letters being written to the War Department protesting that this had happened. And this is one of the pivotal events that led to the integration of the armed forces. And so this book commemorates that event. It's actually about a little girl named Sydney, whose father is one of the officers who's arrested, and she's hoping to try to get a picture of him before he leaves the base. And she meets up with my grandfather, and together they're able to get this picture.
Oh, that is so sweet.
So that was a lot of fun to write. And it was also, like I said, it was deeply personal, so it was also very emotional to write, but it was a lot of fun. And then in addition to that, I have a series called Mr. Grizzly's Class that came out in August. And it's about a group of kids in a class led by a teacher named Mr. Grizzly. And it really is focused around social emotional learning. And so they learn, you know, how to recognize their feelings, how to help one another, how to have courage in difficult circumstances, things like that. So the first 4 books came out in August. There will be 4 more coming out this coming August as well. So that's been a lot of fun. I got a picture from a friend the other night of her son reading the books. And so it was really cool to see. So.
Okay, Mr. Grizzly's Class. I got to put that on my list next. That is awesome. So you write the book there is a picture book, and then you're writing middle grade. Are those like chapter books, or what's your main
Yeah,
genre?
I've been all over the place the last couple of years. So I write mysteries. So I actually have, they're not on the shelf here behind me, but I have two middle grade mysteries that came out this month as well. That I
Wow,
actually
you are
wrote
on
as school
fire.
drama. Yeah, it's the pandemic has led to sort of a weird confluence of events where I have all these books coming out at once, which in one respect is good, but it also looks like I work way harder than I really so.
Well, I
But I
guess the
have more.
publishing industry takes a while for things
Oh
to.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so like these books all came out last year, but I signed the contract for the Freeman Field photograph in 2017.
Oh, okay.
So it just took a long time for that to come out, and so yeah, things have sort of stacked up. So it's been an exciting time, but it's been a little weird. So I primarily write chapter books in middle grade. I actually don't write a lot of picture books, though I say that I actually am under contract for two more picture books that'll be out next year.
Okay.
I have those coming out, but yeah, primarily chapter books in middle grade is what I write.
Now, how does your daughter react to your writing, or what she say about this?
Well, she's funny about it. She's a big help. I give her stuff. I give her, I tell her, hey, I need an animal. What kind of animal should it be? And it's usually a fox or an elephant is what she comes back with. But she helps a lot with that. She's actually at school right now. The last thing she asked me before she left for school was if she could call into this today.
Oh
And I was
man, I
like,
wish we had her.
well, she's in class right now, so she better not call in.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so she's very supportive. My wife's been incredibly supportive. I mean, as a writer, you spend a lot of time looking at a page and writing while your family's doing other stuff. Um,
Right.
and they've been incredibly supportive. And my daughter has been just a joy. She loves to read, which is fun, and so she pulls books off the shelf. I mean, we have a rule here: if it's on the bookshelf, anybody can read it.
That's
And
good.
so, she'll come in here, and every once in a while, I have to go and look and make sure that the bookshelf looks the way it did last time I thought it did. So there aren't big gaps missing or things like that. But yeah, she's been a joy to have kind of go through this journey with. And she looks at all these. She has a collection of all of my books in her room. And so when they come, she's the first one I sign every book for.
Oh,
And,
that's sweet.
and I
Yeah.
sign them all in purple
Oh,
because
okay.
it's been her favorite color. And so I signed them all in purple. And so they're all in her room.
That's good. Now you work. Do you work in Silicon Valley? So you work
I
there?
used to.
Okay.
We live about an hour and a half outside of Silicon Valley now, and I actually work from home.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I still work in technology. I am a chief technologist, and so I design enterprise computer systems for primarily for the government, so for state and federal government agencies.
Yeah. So you're really like a Renaissance man. So you're kind of doing all
Well,
this stuff. So,
yeah, I don't know about that. Like I said, I think the writing helps kind of keep me grounded and not just focusing on computer stuff all the time. But it's fun. I enjoy both, so I'm fortunate, I guess, in that respect.
now another question I had. I noticed there is a Black Women in Science book as well. So this is is this a companion to that or?
Yeah, so there's a whole series of biography books that cover. So there's the Black Women in Science. There's also a Black Inventors book
Oh,
that's really cool, and it covers men and women. And then there are several books in the series that cover women in either technology or in other fields, things like that. And so, yeah, I would encourage you to check out the whole series. There's some wonderful, wonderful stories, and most of them are about people that most of us have never heard of before. And so
right.
I think they're important stories to tell.
And what was really interesting to me too was the man Kittles. Is that his name?
Oh,
I
Nick
was
Kittle.
kind of fact checking. I'm like, he graduated in 1989, but he was
Mhm.
born in 76, so he was really young when he
Yeah,
graduated from high school.
he was really young. It's interesting. He was somebody who one of the reasons I wanted to include him in the book was because of the work he did with the DNA testing and all of that.
Right.
But really, I wanted to include how he kind of came about thinking about it because people always wonder, like, where did that idea come from? And he was doing a study on really grave sites, and they were testing to see if they could figure out where the people in these graves came from. And that's when it occurred to him, hey, we could do this with living people too. And that's what really started this focus on, hey, we could take your DNA and we could try to figure out, where in Africa you come from,
Right.
based on the DNA results that we have and all of that. And so I thought it was really interesting because, like I said, where was the aha moment? And so this was one where I was actually able to find that. So I wanted to make sure we included that.
Yeah, I love that. And then it's so timely with all the interest in ancestry and all that, that
Absolutely.
we have. So this is really cool.
Yeah, well, and that's the funny thing is it's been working on that now for almost 20 years. And
Oh,
I was something I had never heard of. And so it was fascinating to read that, yeah, Ancestry is doing this now and all that, but somebody was doing this long before. So
oh,
it was
okay.
really
Yeah.
cool to see.
I didn't know that. This is so interesting. And what was the process like for writing it? How did you go about or approach your research?
Yeah, so one of those people who loves research. Like I said, I grew up reading. We grew up using the library. In fact, we live in Solano County now. My mom, one of her first jobs as a teenager was working at the Solano County Library. And so
Oh,
libraries have always kind of been a part of our family. And so I did a lot of research. I love newspapers.com. And so if any of you, whether you're writing nonfiction or even if you're writing fiction and you want to, you want information on, what was something like in the 1980s or the 1950s or the 1800s, you can go in and you can read through newspapers from all over the country, going back to really the mid 1800s. And so I used a lot of that because I could find interviews and articles about individuals. A lot of universities have archives where they've collected things. And so you can go in and look through all sorts of things. James West was nominated for a Westinghouse Award. So I found the award booklet from that year that listed all of the winners and all of those things. And so I spent a lot of time doing research and just sort of figuring out their overall stories and then what part of their stories I wanted to tell. And for me, I really wanted to focus on two things. So one, obviously, their accomplishments, but I wanted to focus on sort of what they did to overcome any issues or things
mhm.
like that that other people could read and say, hey, maybe that's something I could. And so that was sort of I did the research on each person until I kind of got to the point where I felt like that's really where they got. And so I looked at like James McCune Smith, who was the first Black doctor in the United States, had to go all the way to Scotland to get his medical degree because it was illegal for him to get one here in the United States.
Right.
And so I wanted to show that, not so much to show like, geez, he had to go halfway around the world to get a medical degree, but more importantly, to show what he did afterwards. He got on a
Mhm.
boat and came back because he wanted to serve Americans. So he did what he needed to do to get his degree, but he didn't let it deter him from his goal of serving Americans as a doctor. And he went on to become one of the most sought after doctors, regardless of race. And so I wanted to look for things like that, where we could tell those kinds of stories. And then also a lot of these men, as I said, they mentored people, but they had really good advice. And so Frank Green was actually somebody I knew. He was friends with my parents. So I met him first at a very young age and had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with him. And we, one night, shortly after I graduated from college, we were at dinner. And he told me then, he's like, make sure you're always ready for success. And he told me that several times afterwards. He never told me why he said that. And it was in researching this that I came across an interview that he did where he actually explained what happened. And he and a number of his friends were in the second integrated class at St. Louis University, and they went to school during the time that the sit-ins had begun
Oh, yeah.
around the country. And so that's what they said that we're going to do this too. And so they went around different places at the university, and they staged sit-ins. So, typically there were two responses, right? You were either completely ignored or you were harassed
Oh,
and
yeah.
thrown out, right?
Mhm.
So one night they went to a place and they sat down at the table, and a waiter came over with glasses of water and menus and asked them what they wanted to order. And it was then that they looked at one another and realized, we don't have any money with us. They hadn't brought any money because they hadn't expected to get served. And that was what led him to always tell people, make sure you're always ready for success. And I never knew that. But I remember him telling me, hey, make sure you're always ready for success. And I remember thinking, okay, I think I am. I don't know. But the context of that story really helps drive it home. And so that's what I look for with each of the 15 people that I featured is what's that one story where if I wanted to just tell somebody, hey, remember this person. What's the one story
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, there's so many. I remember that story. Yeah, those little stories you've woven in stick with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm getting the names confused because I just read this weekend. Right. But yeah, those are little things I'll never forget, these little pictures you've painted with these.
Yeah, and that's my hope is that, it's hard to remember someone's biography from, beginning to end, but it's those little moments that turn out really to be sort of the larger moments that stick with you that I was looking for with each person.
Yeah, I really love this. It did get me upset in many parts just looking at what people had to go through, but all these brilliant men who are educated in Ivy League universities and then have to go to a little high school to teach because they won't let them. But look at how they overcame all of that. So this is so inspirational for all of us.
Yeah. Well, in that example, so yeah, Charles Henry Turner, that to me was one of the most fascinating stories. And I think if I had to pick a biography, that was probably the one that sticks with me the most. Because like you said, it wasn't like he eked by and got his education. He was incredibly smart, got a PhD, and couldn't get a job teaching at a university anywhere in the country. And so he taught in high school, and he still didn't let that stop. He produced more scientific papers than his peers, despite not having a university budget, despite not having research assistants, and despite working really nights and on holidays when the students were away, when he could use the lab and have it to himself. But he still didn't let any of that deter him, and he made incredible discoveries in science. He also created different testing apparatus, some of which are still used today, and all of that out of a high school lab. And so it's one of those things where, again, if he can do it, think about what we can accomplish.
Right. And that's just inspiring for anyone, no matter what their race or anything.
Exactly. Yeah. The conditions are never perfect. And so I think being able to look at examples of people who've overcome and who've had the fortitude to say, look, I'm not going to let this stop. I think it's important. And like you said, regardless of what race you are, I think it's inspiring.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bryan, for coming on and talking to me or speaking with me and sharing the backstory behind this wonderful book. And I wish you much success. It came out yesterday, right? Was that the official release?
It's in stores now. Yeah. I think so I saw for a little while yesterday, it looked like it was back ordered on Amazon, but hopefully people will be able to get their hands on it soon.
And sometimes when they say it's back ordered, they still can order it. So tell them to just keep.
Yep. Yeah. So still go ahead and place your orders. It should come. I think there's like a 1 to 2 day lag at this point. But yeah, I appreciate everybody's support and enjoy the book.
Yeah, we love to see it. We're so happy to see it. And where can people find you, Bryan, and learn more about your work?
You can find me online at bryanpatrickavery.com. It's Bryan with a Y. Though actually either Bryan spelling will get you to the same place. So, but yeah, bryanpatrickavery.com. And you can send me a note from the contact form. There's also a thing you can sign up for my monthly newsletter as well. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, and when you read your book and love it, write a review as well. He needs
yes, please. Yeah, reviews help.
Yeah, they all help. Okay, well, thank you so much, Bryan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Write This. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.